Evening, everybody. I would like to welcome you all to Cambridge City Council's Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Committee. It's taking place on the 21st of November at 5:30. My name is Richard Robertson. I'm the chair of the committee meeting. Have we any apologies? I know we've got ones from Councillor Shield.
Yeah, I've had apologies from Councillor Shield and Councillor Griffin is attending as substitute.
Yes, that's it, is it? Okay. All right, I'd like you all to...
Councillor Todd Jones is running late. He'll be here in about 10 minutes.
Councillor Todd Jones. Okay, thank you. I'd like you all to introduce yourselves. So I'll go around, starting with my deputy, Councillor Wood.
Present.
Councillor Dave Bagent.
I'm here, Chair.
Councillor Naomi Bennett.
Just about here, Chair.
Councillor Tim Bick.
Present.
Councillor Mike Todd Jones is late. Going to be late. Karen Young.
Here, Chair.
Okay. And Councillor Griffin.
I'm here in place of Patrick Shield.
Correct, thank you. We also have three executive councillors. Councillor Mike Davey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Present.
Councillor Simon Smith.
Present, Chair.
And Councillor Anna Smith.
Present.
Thank you. Right, has anybody got any declarations of interest? Councillor Bagent.
Chair, as ever, I am still a member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign.
Thank you. Anybody else? You can, of course, make a declaration at any time during the meeting if something comes up. On to item 3, which is the minutes of the 30th of September. Can I see all those? So, sorry, firstly, are they accurate? Any problems with the accuracy? No? All right, are you prepared to vote for them to be signed off? Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. I think that was unanimous. Thank you. Now, we have item 4 is 8 public questions. Now, those questions are not read out anymore. They're just taken as have been read on the paperwork. The executive councillor or officer who will answer it has 2 minutes to do so. The public speakers also have up to a further 2 minutes for follow-up questions. And then the executive councillor has yet another 2 minutes. Now, we normally try and get those done in 30 minutes. So if any of the questioners want to ask supplementary questions, it would be good if you keep it brief. Otherwise, not everybody will have a chance to get their question answered. So, is Edward Searns, is he here? Oh, sorry, Councillor Young.
Sorry, a quick question. I have not seen the public questions. Have they been sent to us by email? Okay.
Yeah, they were sent yesterday.
I think there's a set over there if you want some. So Edward Searns is here, is he?
I'm on
Oh, he's
line.
online. Sorry, yes, you're right.
Chair.
Now, before you start, though, we also got Will Bannell, whose question is similar. Is Will here? All right, I get one. You're going to get one answer for both those questions, as I understand it, but you will have the opportunity to ask a supplementary if you want. So I'll call you when it's ready. So, Edward, would you like to go ahead with your question?
Would you like me to read my question, Chair? I was expecting
you're
a
quite right. I'm
response
jumping ahead.
to.
Simon, would you answer the question which has been put to us?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to answer questions 1 and 3 together. Just before I start, though, Chair, what I wanted to say is that I learned today that the market was first established in the 800s after Alfred the Great's son kicked the Vikings out of Cambridge. And so what this tells us is there's been continuity of the market for over 1,200 years, or I mean, hundreds of years it's been, which suggests that it's very popular with generation after generation. That actually just makes us stewards of the market, a generation of people who are just looking after it receive it from the previous one and pass it on to the next. And our intention is to pass that market on to the next generation in a much better condition than we found it in, because people of Cambridge and the visitors to Cambridge love the market, and so do we. So the full council approves, committing funding to a further public consultation in 2025 and a planning application in the summer of 2025 to deliver the Market Square vision. In the autumn of that year, a planning application will be submitted for, and also we will commit at that point £3 million for the resurfacing works, which is the phase 1 of the market. In between that time, in the meantime, a business plan will be produced setting out the scheme costs and works beyond phase 1, surfacing works, and the options for funding phase 2. The business plan will also set out the decant arrangements for the market and the package of support for the traders. And the project team will continue to engage with the traders throughout the next stage of the project as the details are worked up. Thank you.
Now, Edward, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. What assurance can the council give that you've learned the lessons from other local authorities that have gone through similar situations, most recently Northampton and Peterborough, which has massively reduced the amount of traders on their markets, and indeed Norwich, whose actual council proposals never went through, and what people see as the market there now wasn't a council proposal. And it doesn't feel like the council is really working with the market traders, because the proposals have got smaller in scale since we started this latest iteration. And also we're 30 years from when the council started to try and improve the market, and it doesn't seem that it's given a lot of confidence in its desire to hand it on better to the next generation. So what assurance can you give that you've learned the lessons from other local authorities and that you will continue to work with the market traders to deliver something that works for everybody? Thank you.
Well, we've carried out a public consultation, and I'm very pleased to be able to say that the market traders were proportionately most responsive to the consultation. We have this separate traders liaison group where traders can come and talk. We can talk to us at any time, and we are in listening and learning mode. But what we're doing is we're progressing this step by step, and we're certainly not going to reduce the size of the market. I don't know where that idea has come from. And we will learn lessons from things that have been less successful and the ones that have been successful. We will try and make the best job of this, and part of that is learning from others and listening to the traders. Thank you.
Right, now, Will, would you like to come forward and ask, do you want to ask a supplementary? No, if you don't need to ask anything more, that's fine. Yeah, come and just sit in this, take that microphone there if you want.
It was, you kind of mentioned it in your answer, which you did mention a package for traders, because my question was about what sort of compensation or liability insurance there might be, in case this all goes wrong. And so what are the details that you can give to assure traders about that package that you mentioned? Is that all right? Yeah.
So we've heard the request loud and clear, and part of the next stage will be the preparation of the business plan from now until the spring. So those discussions will consider the relocation, the decanting process, and the compensation and support matters. So it's to come, and we're hoping to make a decision to make a formal commitment to that. So please just keep engaged, keep talking, we'll keep listening. So that, I hope that gives you the reassurance. Thank you.
Well, the next person on the list is Glynis Self, but I don't think she's here. She's online. Okay. Well, I was told that the traders wanted us to wait until they'd arrived. That's not the case. Okay.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just say it was Ed that asked me to, if it was possible to wait, and Ed has just asked his question, so I think we could probably move on.
We can move, defer?
No. Sorry, it was Ed that asked if he could wait because he wasn't sure he'd be home in time to ask his question. So because Ed was the first on, I think we could probably carry straight on.
Okay, so well, Glynis can. Glynis, would you, you're available to, sorry, I can't see it.
I'm here, Chair.
Righto, thank you. Right, Simon, would you like to answer her question?
Thank you, Glenys, for your question. I think the first thing I'd say is that, no, at this point, nothing's set in stone. We've reached the end of the concept stage, which is the RIBA2, and the report basically satisfies the requirements of that phase. The project team has noted the feedback from the traders at the various meetings you refer to, and there will be an opportunity up to the end of the detailed stage 3 works for feedback. Any issues raised can be fed into this work. So it's going to be continuous engagement with you, all the market traders, on a monthly basis as we go through the detailed work. And I'd just like to extend my appreciation for the work that you do with and behalf of the market traders in this process. The 36 questions and points and comments sent into the project team will be responded to as part of a comprehensive frequently asked questions document that will be published on the Civic Quarter project website as soon as possible. And some of the questions were given a response at the meeting on the 18th of November. Thank you.
Chair,
Yes, Councillor.
sorry to have
Wood.
interrupted now, but could people say when you're introducing the question, I'm not catching which question number and whether the person represents an organisation,
Yes,
please?
you're quite right.
Thank you.
Okay, Glynis, you're asking question 2. Could you explain, introduce yourself and say which organisation you're representing?
On the market, we have a loose group of traders, which we've called it the Cambridge Market Traders Association, and we don't hold. It's a loose community group. Okay. So it's not hugely official because that takes up a lot of time and nobody wants to, we haven't got the time for that. But I have written something here about the feelings that I've collated from the traders that I think the project needs to hear. Can I quickly read through it, please?
Glynis, we're asking you, if you want to ask some further questions, that's one thing. You can't just read out a further statement, I'm afraid.
Okay, so why is there a lack of detail, a lack of practical detail within the project? Why were, I mean, we've been to quite a few of the meetings with the with the project team, but there doesn't seem to be the details that the project should have started from the ground upwards. Okay, it's landed out of space. It's like the borough market idea has come from another planet and it does not meet our trading needs. The 27 permanent stalls, which Julia is going to talk about, is a huge issue with us. We think that is going to be the shrinkage of the market. You keep saying that it hasn't shrunk. It's the permanent stalls that will mark the market, and that is what we're hugely concerned about. And we tried to talk about it in our meetings, and it is not actually discussed in a way that is satisfactory to us. It feels like it is set in stone and it's not meaningful to us.
Okay.
The way that it's been landed on us, we talk down to.
I think we
and
understand the gist of your question.
Yeah.
So Councillor Smith, would you be able
Yeah.
to?
So, okay.
Have you any further questions,
Okay,
Dennis?
so
Yes, I have. No, I haven't finished. We need to be saying that there's that we need what do we need? We need to not have this 27 plan. It's not going to help the future of the market. We need it changing. Okay, we need to save the market through that. Okay, I need to just say that.
Thank you, Glynis. Councillor Smith, would you answer those questions?
well, the next stage we're going through will be the detailed stage. That will be the stage that works out all of the fine details. And we've heard your view on the number of permanent stalls and how they might be accommodated. So we take that into the next stage, Dennis. Thank you.
All right, the next question is question 4 from Anthony Carpen. Would you like to introduce yourself and say which organisation you represent, if any?
Hello there, Anthony Carpen, local historian, and I'm just representing me.
Councillor Smith, would you like to answer this question?
Well, thank you again, Anthony, and for all the contributions you make to our civic life. And reminding us of the history, and particularly Florence Kane's role in the way in which she negotiated competing views about the construction of the building that we're standing in today. So all of the submissions that you made have been responded to, and we are to take each point in turn, if you don't mind. So on the rooftop terrace, which could include a cafe, the analysis undertaken by our commercial advisors indicated that use of the 4th floor space would be better served by extending the commercial office floor plate, noting also the provision of a cafe in the Guildhall Heart space on the ground floor. The second one, splitting the large hall into 2 levels. A key aim of the council is to increase the number of events held in the large and small halls. So splitting the large hall into 2 levels, basically using the small hall as an anteroom would limit the number of events that could be held in both spaces. So the third point, any additional floor space above the sessions and police court. This has been explored in detail. And one of the key reasons that it's not being proposed within the Stage 2 package is basically structural implications. Adding floor spaces would require significant structural alterations, which would result in harm to the heritage and cost a significant sum of money. And then the fourth point, which is lifting the council chamber, the structural implications of lifting the council chamber would also be significant in terms of cost and heritage implications. However, we're also seeking to celebrate and improve the council chamber to make this a multifunctional space, one that can be used for other things other than our meetings, but also within the constraints of its heritage merits. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary, Anthony?
I do, and really, actually, this is a message for the Minister for Housing and any of the councillors that actually get to meet him, because this project was commenced in the dying days of the previous Conservative government, and their vision for local government was basically to hollow out and almost get rid of it. And the lack of space for local government functions in the new proposals is something that I find profoundly depressing. And so really I urge councillors to tell the Minister for Housing that the proposals as we see and the lack of space for local government functions and local public service functions does not fit with his vision for the future of Cambridge, and he needs to really get his advisors and his civil servants together to come up with a much better structure that matches the ambition that he has for the expansion and growth of our Cambridge, because currently our city feels like it's a city with a globally recognised name that is functioning and is run by an institution with the competencies of a small market town. We are better than that. Please tell the Minister that there is strong feeling over the future of how our city is governed, and at the moment too many of our institutions are not fit for purpose. And in my opinion, the proposals put forward by the consultants based on the previous government's time in office reflect that. Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to Julia Cox, who's online. Oh, sorry.
Can I answer
You
that?
go answer that one.
Yes, thank you. There are proposals for us to explore unitary status, but I don't think that discussion is appropriate for this meeting. But what we've done in the Guildhall is the option that we're seeking to progress is to preserve all of the civic rooms and facilities, but also within the offices, we'll have complete flexibility to be able to expand or shrink according to the demands, the competencies that this council has. So in the future, it could be completely full of local government officers if we have local government reorganisation along the lines in which you are suggesting. But there's one other message that we want to send to government, and that is simply that when you're building a globally competitive city, you do have to think about the cultural aspects and the public amenities that go with a great city, and they need funding as well as the houses and the infrastructure to support them. And that's why we're bringing forward refurbishment of the Corn Exchange and refurbishment of the Market Square, because it's a global important city and it needs to actually demonstrate and reflect that status. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we do move on to question 5, and Juliet Cox is online, I think. Are you there, Julia?
Hello, I'm here.
Okay. Would you like to introduce yourself and say which organisation you represent?
Okay, so I'm not representing a particular organisation. I'm a market trader on Cambridge Market. I trade 5 days a week.
Thank you. We'll just get to an answer to your first question. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. So the concept design sets out proposals for 91 market stalls in the square, and the stall space for trading will be the same or slightly more than at present. There's no loss of trading space. The concept design sets out for 27 stalls under the canopy and 64 demountable stalls.
Yes.
If the proposals are taken forward, we work with market traders to identify suitable new stalls, permanent and demountable, that will be sturdy enough in all weathers. We'd work with traders using designs that have been stress tested by market traders in other places before a final decision is made. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions, Julia?
I kind of don't feel that this is really good enough. The numbers may work on paper, but in practice, I can't really see how this can happen, because the reality of it will be many of these traders, or many of us as traders, would probably be unable to operate off dismountable stalls. I understand that the amount of space is going to be the same. However, at the moment, the 33 traders using 54 stalls, at the moment, most people will use countertop layouts. So 27 stalls is still going to be a massive shortfall in terms of space. In reality, it's not going to work. And everybody I've spoken to on the market, most of my fellow traders, everybody feels the same. Nobody wants to work from a demountable stall.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, would you like to answer that?
Well, we've heard the message, and we move on to the next phase, and that's going to be a key point for discussion and resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to question 6. Hannah Williams. if you come forward and introduce yourself, say who you're representing.
Hi, I'm representing CamCycle and our 1,750 members. And if I could just summarise my first question in a sentence, we are asking if the City Council commit to significantly increasing the number of cycle parking spaces in the city centre, as there'll be even more needed if this area becomes more of a destination. At the moment, we're concerned from the proposals presented that the designs are actually reducing them.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Well, I probably have to declare an interest at this point.
Could you turn your microphone off? Thank you. Sorry, no, not you.
That was yours, I think it was you. Oh, sorry, no, don't. Okay. So I have to declare this point of interest here because I am a cyclist, and I find it difficult to find spaces to park my bicycle in the city centre. So clearly, this is a very important issue, and this is something that we will look at in detail through the next phase in consultation with CamCycle to make sure that we do have enough spaces for our growing city, because you're quite right, a large proportion of the people who responded to the consultation told us that they arrive into the city centre by bicycle. We've got to reflect that in the work we do. Thank you.
Do you have a further question?
Yes, I do. Yeah, and based on some of the things that Councillor just said, I was going to ask what data gathering has the project done so far on the mode share of how people are currently getting to the civic quarter area to help inform the projections for the future? Because most of the respondents to the consultation survey did say they had cycled in, and in the on-site surveys carried out by the Cambridgeshire Sustainable Travel Alliance, only 14.3% of people had travelled there by car or van. So if this project is serious about making sure that as many people travel to the city centre by sustainable transport as possible, it needs the good routes, good links in, and also the good facilities.
Councillor Smith.
Well, I endorse everything you've just said. So that's included in the next phase. We'll work with you on that.
So do you have any data at the moment?
That's a supplementary.
No, that was in there.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not. It's quite rude to stand with your back to someone. We haven't done detailed survey work, but I think it's a good point. That's something that we will address when we develop the public realm proposals.
Thank you.
Councillor Davey, you wanted to say something?
Yes, just a declaration. Although I'm not a voting member of the committee, I'm a member of CamCycle, so I need to probably declare that in the interest of fulfilment.
Thank you. I'm not being inundated by others, no? Okay. Right, let's move on to questions 7 and 8, neither of whom are attending, but if you could answer. Katie Preston is just representing herself, I believe. Would you be able to answer her question?
So, over the past 6 to 8 years, we've so thank you for your views. The consultation this summer basically elicited 800 comments from the public and stakeholders, including the market traders. The responses have been published in full, and you'll see from the consultation responses from the market traders. What is very clear in the feedback is that security and antisocial behaviour is a high priority, and that the designs also reflect the feedback from the consultation and the planners. So 2 stakeholder groups are set up to coordinate large numbers of stakeholders with a variety of interests and views. So the Civic Quarter Liaison Group is open to all and covers the whole scope of the project. So Guildhall, Corn Exchange, market, public realm. Whereas the Market Traders Group is by invitation to the traders that have a licence with the council and focuses on more detail around the market operations and specific impacts for this group. We've answered an earlier question, the point made about the 27 permanent stalls, and there will be no loss of trading space compared to present levels. There's further detailed work to be done in the phase which will feed into the consultation in the spring. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you now answer the question from John Preston, who was also not in attendance?
Nate.
Yes, sorry, question 8.
Thank you.
Sorry.
The Market Traders Group is a closed group. It was set up for traders only as the significant stakeholder group that has a legal relationship with the council. So they had a safe space in which to raise issues and views about the project. In previous meetings, you had asked to participate, and at the chair's discretion, with the agreement of the traders, this was agreed. Market traders' views have been published publicly as part of the engagement report. In part 1 of the question, we have set out why 2 stakeholder groups were set up, and the Civic Quarter Liaison Group is open to all.
Right, that ends all the public questions. Now, we have a lot of people interested in the Civic Quarter item. I need to know whether the councillors on the committee are likely to want to discuss any part of the confidential items. Because if they're not, then we could take that whole item now, rather than leave it to the end of the agenda. I don't want to have half a debate, an hour and a half, on the confidential items at the end of the agenda before we exclude the public.
Chair, just to confirm that from the point of view of Councillor Young and myself anyway, we don't think that we are going to need to refer to confidential information.
Right.
And so would much prefer it was debated immediately after all the questions about it.
Yes, quite so. Councillor Bennett.
I think neither alternative is perfect, but considering the depth of the public interest, I would prefer that we attempt to debate this in public and don't refer in detail to the confidential items. We have managed to talk about confidential reports without sharing the confidential information before, and I appreciate it's an effort for everybody, but it's one I'm prepared to make.
All right, and I understand my Labour group are not going to be delving into the confidential items either. So in which case we can take item 8 now, so which is the Civic Quarter. So I'll refer you to page 133 of the agenda, where there's a report. Now there is a set of revised recommendations which are in the additional information. So that's on pages 11 and 12 of the additional information. So when we get as far as recommendations, that's what we will be looking at voting on, as it stands at the moment anyway. So, Ben Binns, Assistant Director of Development, are you able to introduce the paper, please?
Good evening, committee. I've got a presentation to share, which I thought would be useful. It's very visual. We've already gone through the addendums, so I won't talk about that, and you're also aware about the confidential appendix as well. So if I can move to the next slide then, please. Just to reiterate, there were over 800 responses to the consultation, which we're very pleased about, and we're going to take each area in turn and highlight what the current proposals are. So for the Guildhall, the 3 items, the key items of feedback were around the use of space, community use, and the hotel proposal, which had mixed feedback. So what I intend to do is to go through the current proposals that are in the pack and that will be voted on. And if we move to the next slide, we'll start with the entrance to the Guildhall, and this reflects the response to the public consultation about making the Guildhall more accessible to more people and ensuring that it's accessible in terms of mobility, but also accessible in terms of open to all. And this is just a conceptual view of what the Guildhall might look like as you move into the central heart of the Guildhall. And there you can see seating areas which will be open to the public, whether you're waiting to go into the customer service centre, whether you're meeting someone there just for a coffee, you can see the cafe there, or whether officers are meeting members or members of the public. If we move to the next slide, this is very much a response to the feedback around having community use and greater space put aside for something other than offices or council. And we have put space aside in these current proposals for cultural attraction, and we're currently in talks with the Museum of Cambridge for that space in the basement in the green area. And we very much hope that these will continue to develop in the next phase. The image on the left there you can see is how light will be brought into the basement, bringing life into the basement so that that can be utilised as a really great space for meeting rooms or a cultural attraction. If we then move to the next slide, I'm just going to talk through each floor that we've got there. So the current proposals assume 50% council use, 50% for offices, and I'll explain the colour coding in just a bit. The proposals assume net zero. We are targeting Enefit for this one, which is a passive house standard for retrofit, and the energy will come from air source heat pumps, or if in time, district heating. Now, the first image on the left is the basement, which I've already talked about, and what we're proposing is meeting rooms in the basement for council staff. This is again part of the reflection and feedback from the consultation, particularly from staff in the offices who are concerned about working in the basement. So all staff are now working on the first, second and ground floors. So as you move to the ground floor, you can see the yellow. I should point out the purple is council office space. The yellow is the customer service space. So this will be very visible and very accessible on the ground floor. I've talked about the heart space, which will be open to the public. And then you can see the sort of left wing, which will be office space and cycle storage and kitchenettes for the council staff. When we move to the first floor, this is very much the chamber, the halls and the committee rooms, and they're highlighted in a sort of light orange colour, and that's very much part of the council. And we have already mentioned that we want to bring the chamber and update the chamber so that it can be used as a multifunctional room as well as a chamber for that. And we have to take into account the heritage considerations for that. But you can see the further offices for the council, and the same on the second floor. But by that time, you're starting to see a bit more of the office space, and the predominant office space will be on the second, third and fourth floors. And the office space, which will be leased either as offices or by desk, will have their own separate entrance, which will be off Pease Hill. One of the reasons the proposals assume office compared to a hotel is, as been mentioned before, is the flexibility for the council. So if the council needs to expand its offices, it can do so. Equally, if the council needs less office space, it can do so as well. And so that has immediate flexibility compared to a hotel, which would be on a 25-year lease. If we turn to the next slide, this highlights the financial figures that are in the report, in the public domain. So I just want to look at three different figures. So the first figure is the office income increasing from about just over 100,000 to just under 500,000 per annum. We also think we can increase the income from the halls from what is currently more or less break even to about 129,000, which will generate significant increase in income for the council. Now, when you combine that to what our current situation is of costs, significant costs of running 2 offices, we think we can get our operating costs down to around £500,000. And of course, when you add in the cost of capital, there is still a net benefit for the council. Now, this is where the hard work really has to start looking at all of these figures and modelling to make sure that the savings materialise as we move forward in the design. If we move to the next slide, I move on to the Corn Exchange, and the feedback was as expected. 3 areas of feedback: improve the acoustics, improve accessibility, and also improve the atmosphere and the entrance. And that's very much was the part of our designs and as expected. So we've made 3 key improvements. If we can move to the next slide, please. So 3 key areas. One is to increase capacity. So from currently around 1,500 to 2,000. The other one is to increase the food and beverage offer. At the moment, we really only use 1 bar, perhaps 2 bars. We're proposing to increase the food and beverage to 4, which will also increase sales, and then improve sustainability, which will reduce running costs. We are aiming to get to net zero as close as possible. The heritage nature of the building makes it very difficult. It's got very thin walls, but we do expect to generate energy from either an air source heat pump or from district heating. So if we look at the next slide, you can see how we're trying to improve the entrance and accessibility of the Corn Exchange. So here we have proposals to show a food and beverage outlet on the ground floor and the mezzanine, but creating a lot more space, which allows more people to mingle rather than being hemmed in as is currently the situation as it stands. Of course, further design work will need to take place, but if we then look at the next slide, I think one of the great parts of this design package is bringing Parsons Court back to life. At the moment, it's quite an ugly road full of bins, and it's not an area you'd wish to congregate in. We think we can bring that back to life, make it an area to congregate in, and you'll see on the right-hand side the Parsons Court building, which is owned by the council. Proposals are to bring that as a food and beverage offering, which again will be increasing the attraction of the Corn Exchange as part of the whole proposal. And of course, the design includes accessible toilets and more toilets as well. We then go into the Market Square. The engagement was very strong in 4 areas. Security and antisocial behaviour were a key concern, whether that's during the day or at night time. Biodiversity and sustainability, another key bit of feedback that many residents reported. And then, of course, this is particularly true of traders, but also residents. What will happen to traders when there are works going on, if approved? And then more generally, the accessibility challenges of the whole area around the market and in the market. And so in response to that, if we look at the next slide, that's right, I'll talk through this. There are some other images that will paint a further picture of this, but on the right-hand side, you will see the grey area. That is a proposal for a canopy, and underneath that canopy will be permanent market stalls. The total number of stalls in this proposal is 91, and they are proposed to be 3 by 3, that's 3 metres by 3 metres, which means the size of the market doesn't shrink, it's the same as what we've got at the moment. And the proposals around this is to allow the market to expand and contract throughout the week and throughout the seasons, and allow a more inviting place within the whole market square. And you'll see under the canopy there is a seating area. It will also provide storage for the demountable stores. The whole square, the proposals are to make it a shared surface, which will improve accessibility, give priority to pedestrians and cyclists, and we will look at proposals about enforcement in terms of scooters and parking and deliveries when they shouldn't be delivering and parking on there. There will be, of course, the keeping the disabled bays and disabled parking throughout that. You'll see on the left-hand side of that proposal a new fountain proposal that will follow Hobson's conduit, bringing a record of that heritage and history of that stream. I think if we go on to the next slide, we can then just give quite a conceptual view of what that canopy may mean and what the impact may mean in the square. It is designed to be quite a discreet and light canopy. Current proposals suggest we could put solar panels on it and also glass, which would allow sunlight through it. But these do need to be worked up, and we do need to work with the traders to make sure that it works. I think on the next slide, you'll see an image. This is opposite where Gales is at the moment, and you can see it's quite a light touch canopy, but it will provide all weather protection for the market. If we move to the next slide, I think we are going to move on to the feedback that was in the consultation, which was where will the traders go? And so what we did, we asked traders, we gave them three options. Do we do all the work at once? Do we do some of the work? Or do you want to go off-site? And what you can see in the proposals there in green is where the market could be while works are undertaken. And the preferred option by traders was the one on the right-hand side, where they preferred half the work in terms of the surfacing work to be done, whilst the rest of the market remain in situ or around the Guildhall. And that's what we're going to move forward on. Of course, we need to do a bit more work and work with the traders to get the details right. Thank you. Next slide, please. So just a little bit on public realm. Again, the feedback on the public realm was cycling. Please make it more pedestrian friendly, make it more accessible, and certainly ensure there's enough cycle parking. And you've already heard from Cam Cycle here. The proposals very much reflect that. And in the proposals, if we look at the next slide, you can see significant proposals to look at a shared surface to try and reduce the amount of traffic in the area whilst allowing deliveries and to ensuring more accessibility and more cycle parking overall. And you'll note there's a real commitment there to biodiversity, trees, and providing shade as well. If we can then look at the next slide, please. So this just summarises what the ask is. What we're proposing today is an ask of 3 million, and that is for planning submission. And what we're proposing is that then we will return in autumn for final proposals with the timescales costings, which at the moment are listed in the report and on your slide there. And then in terms of timescales, in the next slide, I just want to highlight some key milestones. So if approved today, we want to go to consultation in June 2025, late spring. If that goes with the good feedback from that, then we will be on track to look at a planning submission in September 2025 or in autumn. And that's the point we would then ask before we submit planning for further approval at S&R. In September 26, all being well, we will be looking to get into a contract, a build contract with a contractor, and looking to start on site shortly after. We would expect a number of phases, but the completion of initial priority works for the Market Square and the Corn Exchange, we would expect would take up to a year, and then up to 2 years for works for the Guildhall. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Now I turn it over to you to ask questions. Councillor Vick.
Thank you, Chair. We have some questions, but I would like, if I could, to make some of the general comments about the package as a whole. From our point of view, the outcomes that are represented by the Civic Quarter project are outcomes that we think are desirable. We want them. I mean, from the Guildhall's point of view, we see this as a green and environmental project. It does require a lot of upfront funding, but it does enable substantial ongoing saving for the council. The reduction, large reduction in underused facilities that we have now, and functional modern offices for those who need it in the council. For the Corn Exchange, while we don't want to get into the jeopardy with our customers there of a roof leaking, we need to secure the Corn Exchange for safe ongoing business. And for the Market Square, well, we have, unfortunately, a dwindling market that none of us want to see dwindle, which badly needs investment. And we see a public space which is really, frankly, quite jaded in the middle of the city. So we don't see these as idle or luxurious proposals of any kind. But we do think the project in total does need to be careful that it ensures that it's got financial plans that go with it, which ensure value for money, and it spends money with a payback to the community and the public purse. I think the good news that we see from reading the reports is that all of that ought to be possible. We think that the new capital needed for the Guildhall project needs to secure a secure net ongoing saving to the council relative to other uses for the same money. We think that the investment from the development of the Corn Exchange business should be supported by increased income from its own operation, or it should come from elsewhere. And we think that the desirable investment in the Market Square is going to be hard to fund from increased income and will need external grant income. But it's a community benefit, widespread and difficult to quantify. But looking at this report, we were disappointed that we didn't feel that the evidence was yet in place. So we welcome that there has been a backing off from asking straight away for budget approval for £55 million at this stage. We need a much more convincing and precise plan before we could support that. And we do welcome as well the fact that it's now broken down into stages in the case of the Market Square and the Corn Exchange, which reflects, I think, the funds that we have to deploy. In particular, with the Guildhall, there's been a switch from a hotel to offices at the core of that model. I mean, we would like to see that pressure tested. In the abstract, I would have said, and I did say, offices seems a much better idea. But when I look at the numbers, and I only received some of these numbers this afternoon, a few hours ago, it does appear that a hotel would provide a stronger and more secure flow of income, even though it would require more investment as well. And it seems that we shouldn't dismiss that completely at this stage. There are other issues also apart from finances, and they include the management of a more complicated tenure structure, which I think also brings with it a cost and a distraction, whereas I would have understood the hotel arrangement as one which we could make a lease agreement and let it proceed on its own for a long period of time. And on the Corn Exchange, we don't yet have a business plan based on the proposals, But beyond things like repairing the roof and the fabric that we've got today, if it comes for elements that are increasing the income of the corn exchange through attracting customers, so if that can't pay for itself, we're asking why that's something that we would be investing public money in. I mean, we may be able to get grant from elsewhere, but it seems that it would be right to stop after repairing the roof and try and make sure we do get that money. So when it comes to a future decision of committing the big money, we'd like to see distinct financial plans for each of the 3 projects. Now, we understand how they come together and they complement each other in creating a positive impact in the city centre, but actually they are projects quite distinct from each other. They have very distinct financial profiles, and we think there ought to be plans which reflect that, which separate them out and demonstrate that they're the right things to do. So the other thing is that now we're talking about a decision about £3 million to go to the next stage, not 55 million to go to the big stage. The question really is today, do we have enough here to feel confident to justify that decision? Now, 3 million seems like a small sum compared with 55 million, but normally we would be quite careful about 3 million. And I think the questions that we have are really about whether we think we've got here the threshold of justifying that 3 million investment, because none of us would want that to be wasted. That's all I wanted to say, and I would like to come back at a later stage with another point at a sort of smaller scale level of one of the projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I've got several questions, but can we just go through them one by one? Yeah. Okay, so talking about the Market Square first, clearly the request is only to do phase 1, and I understand it makes sense to do a planning permission for the whole thing, because then you've got the basement right for the structure that you want to put on top of it. But there's a huge concern, as you've heard from the public questions. I did wonder, where you think the money is going to come from, and potentially when. Yeah, one at a time. Sorry.
Yeah, would you like to take 3 questions at a time?
Oh, you want me to ask 3 questions? Well, that was my question on the market. So
okay,
let's do the market first.
I take the point. Let's do it like that. Any other questions on the market? If we take the market questions first, and then so we ask Gills on.
Okay, my question on the markets is, I'm concerned about the disruption for traders if they have to move for resurfacing, move back, and then move again later if we can finance the further work that is needed, because that increases the existential threat for the traders and the market. I am a disabled woman, and I do hate cobbles, but I don't really see a big win from doing the cobbles early, because the rest of the public realm around the market is just so inhospitable to people who have a mobility disorder, or sort of have a sensory disorder, or just have small children or a pram with them. So it's so hard getting to the Market Square that I do it as little as possible. And the thought that we might have nice flat paving and not cobbles there would not really be an incentive. So my question is that, is it really worth bringing forward the cobbles work if we can't bring the whole market project forward? And if we do have to split it, what additional business continuity support and planning can we do to minimise the existential threat for traders and to the City Council's own income from the market? Thank you.
Any further questions on the market? No? Okay, Councillor Ben, would you like to answer those?
Certainly. So, in terms of the first question, where will the money come from phase 2 in particular? Experience tells me and others that it is much easier to gain grant or other finance or external finance once you've submitted planning, because in effect you have a scheme that's ready to go. And in this case, we would have done the first phase, and it's much easier to obtain funding from other sources in that respect. And the other advantage of doing the first phase is we no longer restrict the timing for the planning, because we've now started construction if we complete the first phase. So we don't have an answer of where the money will come. In the next phase, we will be looking at possible sources, and we will be looking at how we attract those sources, and I hope to have a more definitive answer in 6 months' time. In terms of the second question, so the 2 moves, I think that's a really important point. We would rather avoid 2 moves, so our current proposals and our current thinking, or the design consortia that are looking at, is that if we do the first phase, what can be done off-site? So much of the work we think can be done off-site, whether it's the canopy or whether it's the permanent stalls or whether it's the demountable stalls. And so you can plan to ensure and aim for 1 move only, and that would cause minimal disruption or less disruption than 2 moves. So that's the current thinking, and that's what we're working towards.
Councillor Young.
Okay, so I think, as Councillor Bick has said, there's less of a commercial driver for the market because it's all about presenting our city as, you know, the attractive and historic centre that it is. So there, the sort of the payback is much more generalised. But if moving on to the Corn Exchange, and actually to make a sort of general point, we've been promised a business case next year, but I find it extraordinary that we have not got a business, at least with estimated numbers, now. You know, it's been quite hard going through the papers to work out what the sort of the commercial payback will be. So we've got sort of for the Corn Exchange proposals to improve Parsons Court and remodel the interior, but we have received no indication at all of what the improved income would be, which is what a business case would do. Say, well, this is the estimated income of the future state and the costs, and then you can say we do have an indication of sort of savings, but there's very little detail about the costs of actually doing the construction and not having all the other sort of incidental costs around such a project, which would be the lack of income while it's closed, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is, where have we thought through these issues? Do we think there was going to be a commercial income for the costs of the amendments that we're doing? I mean, for me, the Corn Exchange is much more a commercial proposition. I understand we have to fix the roof. You know, I fully support that. But you know, are we going to make money out of this?
Chair, I've still got some points about the market that I want to explore. May we go back to that?
Certainly, okay.
Thank you. I do disagree with Councillor Young. I think there is a commercial imperative to do something about the market because it's in decline. I first shopped at the market as an 18-year-old student, and somewhere back in the late Stone Age. And it, you know, it is a shadow of what it was then. You know, we see all around the country a few successful markets, Warrington, Mould, not many more, perhaps the Arndale Centre. But generally you know, we've seen that there is a national decline, and quite often when you try and do something about it, that is the final blow that finishes it off. I mean, we saw that in Chester. So while I think that if we do nothing on the market, we will lose it, I also think that there is a threat to the markets from what we are proposing. And I'd like to see a lot more detail on a business continuity plan for the markets. I'm aware that we've had some money from the Shared Prosperity Fund, which is being used to support the market. But I feel there's a lot more we need to do, and that needs to be reflected in the plans. Thank you.
Right, Ben, would you like to answer those?
Certainly. Are there more market questions to come?
No, that's everything, thanks.
Okay. So the commercial report that's in confidence does have a 5-year plan on the market. It does show a small increase in income, primarily through the more efficient use of stalls, but there is scope to look at that, and that's what we intend to do in the business plan. In terms of business continuity, we're very cognizant of that, and that's why we've committed in the report that we need to look at that in terms of a support package. Right now, we need information from a contractor that can talk to us about phasing, and that will give us much more intelligence to be able to make a more informed decision about what the support package is. So, for example, the traders expressed an interest in just doing half the work, staying on one half of the market, and the rest, the other half being worked and resurfaced. Now, we need a contractor to tell us if that's practically possible, or whether it's too dusty, or whether it's actually okay. So these are things that take time to work out and need to be worked out. So the support package will come, and that's part of the business plan, and we've committed to developing that. But there is detail on improving the market finances, and that shows that in the report. And there will be further work done in the next phase.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ben.
I had a question on the Corn Exchange.
Yes, there are no more questions on the market for the moment, no. All right, Corn Exchange then.
Okay, on the Corn Exchange, yeah. So again, in the commercial report in confidence, there is a business plan for the Corn Exchange that does show, and there's various appendices. I appreciate there's 900 pages. It's a lot to look at. There's a report, and there's also an Excel spreadsheet that details all the costs and projected revenue, and it does show an increase in income as a result of the design changes. Now, what the next step is to do is to scrutinise those figures. Can we improve them? I very much hope we can improve them, but we need to test them and make sure that they're fit for purpose for the next stage on that. But there is detail in there, and I also provided detail earlier today as well.
Councillor Young.
Okay, well, you know, I did not see the numbers presented in a way that I could understand as what a normal business plan would look like. There is a lot of detail in there, I agree, but not everything put together, and there's no net present value calculation, there's no indication of what the extra cost, for example, of Parsons Court, whether that makes commercial sense. I mean, I do feel that this is, you've looked at it on the basis of looking for savings, I think, without looking at, is this a commercial proposition and should it be done? Anyway, there's a lot more work to do, I agree. Chair, I'd just like to kind of correct one of the misunderstanding from Councillor Bennett. I agree that it needs to be a thriving and profit-making market, and it has been declining. But I do not believe that the work that needs to be done is of a nature that any commercial organisation would carry out, because I don't think that there's going to be a net profit out of it. So I think it's going to be a cost to the council, finances, provided reduced by any grant. But I don't think this is the driver of it is not such a commercial proposition as the corn exchange.
Right. Yes, Councillor Bennett.
I'll come back very quickly on that. The reason why I said there was a commercial imperative is because I think if we do nothing, the income we receive from the market will continue to decline, and that's all I meant. I do not think, I agree with Councillor Young that I think it would be hard to make a pure business case for spending the money proposed on the market. Thank you.
All right. Anything more on the corn exchange we're on now? Questions on the corn exchange? Yes.
On the corn exchange, I think I understand that the figure quoted for the roof repairs is larger than the figure required for immediate and urgent repairs. But I've not seen any breakdown of that. And I'd like to understand how much needs to be spent more and whether we have a budget to ensure that the urgent repairs can be done.
Ben, could you answer that?
Happy to answer that. In the 4.5 figure that's been quoted in the report, approximately about 180 is allocated for emergency repairs, so that's included in the figure. If, as stated in the addendum, there's a need to spend that 180,000 because we're not approving that tonight, then we will have to undertake an out-of-cycle committee report.
So there's quite a lot more work to be done before that will come back to us, is that?
So on the 4.5, we will come back with more detail in next autumn. But the point I wanted to make for emergency repairs for the corn exchange, we have allocated 180,000.
Yes.
If we need approval, we'll do an out-of-cycle process for that.
Thank you. Further questions on the corn exchange? No. Let's move on to the Guildhall. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. So on the Guildhall, perhaps it'd be kind of helpful to confirm what we think the total cost will be for the Guildhall, because it's the information in the report is presented in such a way as to talk about phases, and I think it's very confusing for the public who've read it. So perhaps we can start with a confirmation of what we think the total cost will be, because it implies it goes to stage 3 for 41 million. So there's stage 4, 5, and 6 as well to come. So
Yes, I've presented a new table which I showed on the presentation, which breaks down planning and technical design. So the capital cost of the refurbishment of the Guildhall is 41 million, and the technical design, which will be undertaken by the contractor, so we have to make an estimate, will probably be in the region of around 500,000 to 750,000, but we need that information from the contractor, which is why we've asked for procurement of a contractor.
So the Guildhall cost roughly 42 million, we'll say.
Including design fees, yes, but there are
all costs should be included, right?
Well, it depends how you want to allocate the budget. There are various on-costs, so we could also split the various on-costs associated, my time associated with the Guildhall. So typically, on a capital project, we do split what the cost of the build is, what the various design costs are, and what the various on-costs are. That is usually the way that it's presented on a development programme, and that's what we've done here.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think it's very hard to get an idea of how much money we're going to spend on this project. You know, you are going to be employed, whatever. So what I was trying to get at is, you know, the total, but the total cost extra that we're going to be spending on this project, and I think you said it's 42 million. So within that, we've got various decisions that have been made. So the one in particular is the hotel versus the offices. And the hotel costs are higher, but then the return is very much higher. So, and the reason given for going that extra income is that we want the flexibility. So I'd like a kind of explanation of what we think that flexibility, why we need that flexibility, what could happen that requires us to be flexible.
Chair, I'll answer that question. So
do go ahead, Councillor Smith.
So at this point, we've got the conceptual design, and what we're seeking approval for to go on to full council for now is to progress the details. So we've got the concepts, we go to details, and within that, we'll review the proposals, we'll come down to a more specific scheme, and then you can start to cost it properly and understand more about it. We will also revisit, in that context, the commercial report, and that will be much stronger commercial, report, greater evidence, the sort of thing that we can have confidence in, that actually gets us to the point where we come to discuss the large capital allocation. That's prudent. That's in the interests of the communities that we serve. We can't make that kind of decision without being confident of the evidence in front of us. So that's what we will do. When it comes to elements of this project, across all three, some elements can be supported by a commercial case. That's quite clear. And the consolidation of the council's offices into one location to get rid of that monkey on our back, which is the £2.5 million of operating costs, we need to do that. On the other elements, it's about placemaking, it's about our cultural life, it's about our civic life, and you can't put a price on that. We know it's valuable. We're an important city, and these are the things that important cities have. We host the largest place of entertainment events place in the whole of the east of England. And so we've got a very strong case to go to government and say, look, we need to bring this up to scratch, this building. Please support us in doing that, because it serves a huge population. Everybody comes from all over the place to come to the Corn Exchange for events that aren't ever put on in their neighbourhoods. So we're serving the wider region here. We shouldn't be actually having to fund this through our own resources. But as the officers have said, get to this stage, and then you're in the game. You've got a project that's ready to go. It's fully costed. It's fully designed. There's a real strong community case for it. Help us fund it and make it happen. So that's where we sit with this. And I think at this point, I think we've got enough evidence in front of us. And I think Councillor Bicker's made this point. Have we got enough here today in front of us to justify allocating the 3 million to progress? My view is, yes, we have. This, as I say, this is part of being the city of Cambridge, being a place we're proud of, being a place we want to invest in.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that's very reassuring, because we were slightly worried that we were committing to having either the hotel or the officers at this stage. So I'm delighted to hear that you're going to be going into more detail with the business case. That's the way to go. Yeah, I'm very happy to hear that. Yeah, so, you know, again, we need a business case to be able to decide all of this, and I don't feel the information in the report was presented in a terribly helpful way to be able to understand the finances of this. I'm still concerned there's a lot of costs that have been missed out, that are not taken into account in the numbers. We've been presented with the build costs, I think, but all the other costs associated with doing this, like the decant costs, etc., they're not in there. So, you know, I don't think we've really got to the bottom of what we fully understand the total cost to be. But as I say, yeah, you know, the 3 million is what we're committing to right now. So I think that's a bit more reasonable. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some comments and questions about the costings. I agree with Councillor Young. I'm not happy that we have bottomed out the costings, and this feels to me more like preparatory papers on which you'd base the final report than a full investment report. Now, I want to say that it's quite normal at this stage of a project not to feel confident that you have got to the bottom of the costings issue, and that isn't necessarily a no. But what we should have is a very clear statement of what costs are not included and have not been considered yet. My understanding, and I'd be very grateful if officers could confirm this, is that the figures quoted in the summary do not include the cost of capital, they do not include the decant plan, and they do not include any additional costs that come from the phasing. But if there's any other significant costs that officers would like to bring to our attention before we come to a decision, I'd like to hear them. I'd also like to say something about recommendation 1.1, because we are citing a cost figure, but we're not saying what it relates to, and it's clearly only part of a project. So I just wonder, could we just tidy up the wording? Would it help if I read 1.1 out at this moment, or are we not really at that stage yet?
Can we leave the wording of the recommendation for now, please? I want to leave that for now.
Okay, that's fine by me.
So I'm going to answer part of the question. I'll pass to my colleague Jodie on the cost of capital. So the report does state in there where we need to develop the business plan. And it does state in there that one of them is the relocation or decant costs associated with that. And it's very clear that that is something that has to be developed. Other aspects of the various papers in there, whether it's the cost consultant report or the commercial report, do highlight any exclusions that might be in there. And they're usually standard exclusions that are part of that. So I think we've been clear and transparent, but you are right. At this stage, in any REBA 2 stage, you don't get total cost certainty on a capital project. You only get that really at the build contract. So this is we're working through a progress here of providing evidence of where we are now, and 900 pages of evidence has been presented of design and cost to show this is where we are now. We do need to do more work. That's absolutely there. And we've tried to highlight the costs that are either excluded or need a further work on. But I think I'll pass to Jodie on the cost of capital question, please.
Yes, so just to confirm, we have included an allocation for cost of capital for the Guildhall refurbishment, which is obviously the large chunk of the indicative budget. It is clearly indicative at this stage because until we know exactly what the build costs are going to be and what the project is going to cost, it can only ever be an estimate, but the cost of capital is included for the Guildhall refurbishment as part of the calculation that gets to the net £1 million a year revenue saving, because we felt it was important to reflect that. The other elements of the project that are included within the 55 million, clearly the primary case for those is not to make a financial saving or return, so we haven't fully modelled that element as yet.
Councillor Beck.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think we're in exactly the area now which points to the relevance of what I think Councillor Smith just said to Councillor Young, that it would be foolish to leave the whole question of the hotel proposition for the Guildhall behind, despite what we see in the papers here, because the numbers imply that, that the incremental investment would boost the return for the Guildhall project. And although that might not be our first preference, as the numbers get refined, that may have a use that we might want to come back to. So I think it's really valuable to hear that we aren't going to bolt the door on that, and we are going to kick the tires of this at an early stage after a decision is made at this stage. And the other thing is that I think it re-emphasises the point of the request I made, that when we go to the next stage, whilst appreciating the way it all fits together as a civic quarter, that actually we need discrete plans for each of the three components of it, because it's so easy at the moment to take the costs that are considered to arch over all three and forget them. But actually, they need to be registered and reflected in what we get for our money. So the fact that we pay our professional fees across all three doesn't mean that, for example, the Guildhall project doesn't need to pay back on its share of those. And I think that we really have to accept, we've all talked in these terms, that each of the three projects has a very different sort of profile in what we expect in terms of return. Some, it's very, very financial. Some, it's more qualitative, and we accept that there isn't going to be such a measurable outcome. But we really need to have that discipline, which we don't really have today, because we've got a mixture of overarching costs and then project costs. I think we need to have it all put together when we get to it in the summer next year.
Councillor Davey, I think you wanted to make a contribution.
If I can, Chair, 2 points really. I think obviously Councillor Smith and I speaking during the course of this debate. I think your first request around having the project split into three is something we would be more than happy to go with. We think it's a sensible and wise thing to do. The second thing, though, is I wouldn't want to give you any misapprehension or misunderstanding. The hotel option is at this stage something that we aren't considering as a group, but we'll happily go back and talk to Ben to have figures looked at, but that's not a priority for us.
Councillor Young.
Yeah, just very quickly, and also a plea, because I think the plans assume we're going to be selling Mandela House. So again, I would like to see, a net present value calculate, a business case for doing that versus, say, renting it out. I mean, yeah, just.
Yeah, if I can answer that, absolutely. We've committed in the report to look at that, exactly that, as you say, whether that's refurbishment, disposal. The property team will look at that in great detail, and we'll come back and report on that.
Yes, it's particularly interesting to see whether we would be able to go all of this work and also still own something producing income. But it may not always be possible, but if we can, we will. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. I want to make an associated point to what Councillor Young has said. Before I do so, I want to say that I don't disregard the large amount of work that has already been done, but I do think we need to do more work, And I think rather than having officers have to rush around at the last minute doing supplementary work at short notice, I think it would be better if perhaps Chair and Spokes could come together outside this meeting and talk about what good would look like in the report, so that officers maybe had a framework to work to. I mean, Councillor Young and Councillor Bick have mentioned some of the issues, but we've not really touched on all of them. But I do think it's very important to set out what good should look like for a report like this. I appreciate it's very difficult to do, and I'd like to commend officers for doing as much as they have. But at the moment, I do not feel that we have, what I would expect to have in a commercial situation.
Okay, that was a statement, unless you want to contribute.
I'm taking everything on board, and as we will work with our finance officer on the next stage and the structure of the report and take into consideration, you've mentioned the 3 separate plans. That's something we can take away with, and you've mentioned the property and assets side of things, and then we're happy to take a bit of a feedback as well on the structure of the report. That's not an issue from officers' point of view. The additional information provided, though, that all of that has been in the report. So I think what we do need to look at is making the summary clearer, and that's the feedback I'm taking back to myself and working on future reports.
Councillor Bick.
Chair, I had an amendment prepared, which I just wanted some guidance about when's the best time to talk about that.
Sorry, because it's an amendment to recommendations, let's take that now, and then we could deal with Councillor Bennett's or suggestion. I think that was a bit more minor. Can you distribute the proposal?
If I could just speak to this briefly, Chair.
Do go ahead.
Amongst all the many papers we've got here, there's the output of public consultation that we held on the first round of this exercise. And one of the things that does come back quite strongly from that public consultation is concerns about antisocial behaviour. And I believe that that is appropriate for us to add in alongside all of the other objectives that we have on the Market Square part of this project. It's not to diminish any of those other objectives that we have, but it's to say that the project needs to take account of achieving a beneficial substantial reduction of antisocial behaviour in the square and the achievement of an attractive public space outside of market hours. I think that I speak partly as ward councillor and partly on behalf of many residents and people who go through the market square on the way to something else or after dark. I can recount the experience that Councillor Griffin and I had when we went on a walkabout with the street pastors and the situation that we currently have in the market square after dark when the market isn't operating is really ugly. It is something that we should aim to deal with as a result of this project in an appropriate way. And so rather than just talking about the market square in terms of the market during the day, which we've got all the priorities right, I think, to try and encourage the success and prosperity of the market, the rest of it isn't just about holding events in the market square, because I'm sure there aren't going to be events all the time in the market square, even if there are a bit more often than now. It's about what the environment is in the market square any day of the week after market hours. And I think it's just something that when we're looking to send the team away to sort of refine the project in terms of design principles, that this is something that would be logical to ask them to take on board.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, do you want to respond to that?
Chair, the proposed amendment faithfully reflects the results of the public consultation exercise, and it's a reflection of our lived experience in the market square as well. And so I would ask the committee to support this amendment, and I wish to thank Councillor Bitt for bringing it forward, as it gives prominence to issues that the public have brought to our attention. Thank you.
Good. Any further comments on that? No, I think I'll put that to the vote now then, to see if you want to accept that. We have a seconder, by the way. Just checking. So can I see all those in favour of that addition to the recommendations? That's
Thank you,
unanimous.
Chair. That's unanimous.
Yes, unanimous. Thank you. Now, Councillor Bennett, you wanted to make a change, something else? What was that?
Yes, please, Chair. 1.1 of the recommendations recommends that the full council notes the indicative capital cost budget of 55 million. However, it doesn't say what that relates to, and it's not to the whole of the project. So I'd quite like to add just a few words to make it clear that that only relates to phase 1 of the project, or perhaps to mention the elements it relates to by name, because I do not wish there to be any argument that we are trying to mislead our fellow councillors on this.
So it does say as set out in 8.3. So we look at 8.3. Do we not find the list that you are referring to? Yes, we do. No problem. We've got it already. I don't think we need this amendment. I think it's fairly clear what it's referring to, so I mean, you can put it forward if you like, but I can't see the point.
I think it's such an important thing that it'd be helpful to say that in the recommendation, not buried away in a different clause.
Well, anyway, have you got a seconder? No. Okay, well, the change falls. All right, I think, is there any further discussion on the Civic Quarter report as a whole? No, in that case, I would take you to the recommendation as we've just amended it on the additional papers, page 11, 1 through 1.6, with the addition to 1.2 that we've noted on. Can I see all those in favour? Those abstaining? Those against?
Thank you, Chair. That's 7 for and 1 against.
Thank you. And Councillor Smith, what do you make of it all?
Yes, I'm very happy to accept the recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, it is 7:10. We've been going for an hour and 20 and 40 minutes. I suggest we have a break for 10 minutes and come back at 20 past. Thank you. Oh, we are, okay. Well, rejoining the meeting, having dealt with item 8. We'll now go to item 5, Combined Authority Update, and ask for page 23 of the papers. Oh, plus there's an additional paper in the additional items pack. And ask Councillor Smith, Anna Smith, if you would like to present this report.
And Chair, do you want me to go over there, or am I okay staying here? What's easiest for people?
So you want?
Or do you want me to just present from here, or I see there is a chair over there I could go to if that's more visible for people? What would people prefer?
Well, we can see you either way, so it doesn't matter to us. So let's just stay where you are.
Okay, right, good. I'll stay here then. That's good because I'm surrounded by digital devices, so that's probably a bit easier. Well, thank you, Chair. And there's quite a lot of documents in the pack, so I won't kind of read through them all. You'll be glad to know, but there are quite a lot of things going on, so I thought it might be useful just to highlight a couple of key things before opening to questions, if that's okay with yourself, Chair. So, first of all, on the matter of consultations, the franchising bus reform consultation has had a small extension until next, I think it's Monday, but till the 25th at 9 a.m. That was because there was a technical glitch last weekend, so it has been extended in order to ensure everyone still has the time to fill it in. So please encourage everyone you know to complete it. It is very important that as many people as possible complete that. There is also a consultation just open on the draft MTFP, which is open until the 23rd of December. So again, please encourage people to respond to that. The Combined Authority Board has approved the continuation of the Tiger Pass scheme beyond its current end date of May 25. We need to look exactly how far that goes, but that has been approved. It's been a hugely popular pass. There are now something like 32,000 passes issued. The initial target was 10,000. It's exceeded virtually every metric. And the Combined Authority Board have also given the go-ahead to make concessionary fares cover peak time, which means it will be free for people with disabilities and older people from May 25. We've had a recent announcement of very sizable funding for buses. You may have seen the news about this at the weekend, but the government has announced it's basically 10.6 million for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, which is huge and clearly very welcome and significantly more than has been awarded through the same scheme. It's called a BSIP scheme, which is the Bus Service Improvement Programme. So in previous years, we had £2.3 million awarded. 1 year, nothing. In other years, so this is a very significant amount, and it's a mixture of capital and revenue funding. Skills, which is also often something that's been overlooked, but there's excellent work going on in the Combined Authority in this area. So, for example, £2.4 million extra has been awarded recently to the skills programme, which will be used to be invested in skills boot camps. And the Combined Authority is offering funding to employers of up to 50% of paid internships across the Combined Authority area. That will be for 13 weeks, working between 16 to 30 hours a week. And there are particular target groups for that, but I think that's a really helpful thing. I just want to mention there's been a lot of work on what's been called a shared ambition statement. And I think it's a really important document. It's been done in collaboration with local councils, residents, businesses and other partners. And I think, to be honest, the key thing here is that we have been able to build together across all those partners that shared ambition at all. We are still a relatively new Combined Authority in this area, and to be able to build something that everyone is prepared to sign up to. Now, will everybody love every tiny bit of it? Potentially is a different question. But we have created something that all of the constituent authorities are happy to sign up to, and the local businesses and local community groups. And I think that's something to be hugely proud of. So I will stop there, and I'm really happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the floor? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. On page 30, there is a statement about the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Business Growth Company is being closed down, and I'd just like to understand why and what's it done so far. and just a bit of background behind that decision. And then also on page 30, sorry, I'm trying to find it now. Well, maybe I'll just ask that question and I'll come back with the next one.
Should I take that one
Other questions?
first? Would that
I'll
be?
take three at a time.
Okay.
Councillor Coulthard-Wood.
So my question's on the consultation on buses and bus services. I've had some feedback that it's very hard to understand, and I wondered if you could comment on that. I'm glad that you've extended it, and I just also want to say how pleased I am to see that you know, the Tiger Pass for my residents, I think, has been exceptionally useful. And I'm really pleased to see that the 9:30, the travel for those who are older age persons do find it really, really helpful to be able to travel earlier, including myself. Thank you.
Third question, anybody? Councillor Bennett. Councillor Young, could you turn your mic off? Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. I echo the comments made by Councillor Coulthard-Wood. I've had comments even from Green Party policy team that they found the consultation questions quite technical. And also we commend the extension of the Tiger Pass and say thank you.
Councillor Smith, would you like to answer those?
That would be really helpful, actually, because there's quite a lot there and I don't want to forget anything. So, Chair, please let me know if I do. So, first of all, Councillor Bennett, thank you very much for that excellent feedback. Working backwards, in terms of the consultation, there are very, very strict rules about how we have to consult on this. And I absolutely agree. It is not an easy form to fill in, and there's lots of material there. There is a summary as well as the entire 397-page report, and there are the options to either do the full survey or a slightly shorter survey. But I appreciate it is technical and it is worded in quite a formal way. It is really important that we get this right, and we know from previous combined authority experiences that there are lots of challenges to these consultations. It is really important we get it absolutely spot on in terms of taking all the advice from consultation professionals and legal professionals, learning from the experiences of previous combined authorities to make this as robust as possible. And that doesn't necessarily make for a easy experience filling it in, but we know that it is as robust as we can possibly make it, and that's very important because this is a really, really important consultation. It's about how we run our buses, and we have to show very clearly that the Mayor is informed by a robust consultation. So, you know, huge apologies to your residents, but there is a reason why it's been done like that. Now, Councillor Young, coming back to your question about the growth company. So just to reassure you, it was a limited time company. So it was to oversee a time-limited project, which is a group called GrowthWorks. And GrowthWorks concluded its business at the end of December 2023, with the option of potentially delivering other services if the CPCA deemed it was best delivered or managing through a subsidiary. But the delivery of business support activities that GrowthWorks was doing is now being managed directly out of the Economy and Growth team in the CPCA. So that's things like the Growth Hub, the Inward Investments, sector support for economic champions, the skills brokerage service. So for that reason, there is no need to provide those services managed through a subsidiary company, which is why the Cambridge Growth Company has been wound up, because that work. So the short answer is the work's been taken back fully in-house. That would be the short answer. Did I miss anything? Right.
That's a bit. We want to ask a different question. Yeah.
Yes, I imagine on that last one, does it perhaps also need to be said that this should not be confused with the Cambridge Growth Company of Peter Freeman, which is a completely different thing. But anyway, Just that wasn't what I was going to ask. But what I was going to say was that I'd just like to express appreciation for the scrutiny session that we had at the Planning and Transport Committee earlier this month. I think it was really helpful, and I think it illuminated the pun half intended, the moving parts of the proposal and assisted understanding of what is quite a technical subject. In relation to the news about this the £10.6 million of bus funding, how should we understand that in relation to the revenue that is needed to support a franchising arrangement? Because what I think we learned from the scrutiny session was that that as things currently stood, to have a successful franchising arrangement, there would have to be a significantly higher mayoral precept, so people would be paying effectively more council tax. Does this announcement about the 10.6 million mean that that would offset requirements for higher council tax? Is that 10.6 million every year, or exactly what is it in relation to the franchising proposition?
Any further questions? No, Councillor Smith.
So I'm going to be relatively brief because the trouble is with having gone through, lived and breathed this consultation, the preparation for it for a couple of years, is that it's hard to remember what is public domain and what isn't. And I've also have to be very, very careful around any issue of predetermination. So I'm not able to directly comment really on how that money might be used if the mayor were to make a decision on franchising, because I may be holding myself out to a accusation of predetermining because the decision has not yet been made. Clearly, money has been awarded, and there are many purposes in where that money might be used and offset, but I probably can't go further down in an answer to that, and I'm sorry because that sounds terribly vague, but I'm just being really, really cautious at this point. I mean, I think it is worth remembering that the way that we have been required to set out costings, which has been required by the auditors, is to show that the combined authority can by itself fund franchising. It doesn't necessarily mean that that is the way it has to be funded, and I think that's a really important caveat. So it isn't that the precept would have to change by this amount. It's saying if the only funding available was the precept, that's how it would work. And I think that's a really important clarification, because the auditors are very clear on that point, that what we have to show in the business case is how the combined authority could do it internally. And the business case does, of course, talk about a whole range of other possible funding sources which might be allowed to come into that, and obviously external government funding is one such funding source. So that's probably all I can say. Is there anything else, Chair?
Thank you. I'd like to ask you a question. Is the combined authority's budget was always set at a fixed amount without allowing for inflation? Is that still the case?
That is still the case, Chair, yes.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah.
Yes.
Councillor Gawthorpe, you wanted to ask a question?
Well, it was just a question about skills, education, green skills, and what does it mean for Cambridge? I think there's mention of... Oh, sorry. Yeah, did everybody hear what I said? Oh, right, okay, I'll repeat it. My question was really the mention of adult skills, educational cold spots, and green skills, and what does it mean for Cambridge, given our likely growth?
Thank you. And Chair, just to build slightly on what you were saying before, yes, it is very problematic that, in effect, we are still getting the same money that the combined authority had when it was set up. So you're not seeing that inflation increase every year, which is something that would be much be desired. So although although there is still a core funding, which with my city council hat on sounds amazing, but actually that is going down year on year because of inflation. So other sources such as the money coming in for buses are really important. In terms of skills, I mean, one thing I might suggest, because it's something we often don't talk about, we tend in this committee, quite understandably, we're talking a lot about the kind of business and transport sides of things, but the skills aspect of the combined authorities work is very important. And one thing we might do, Chair, is I know we have invited in the past officers from different parts of the combined authority to come to this meeting. It may be that we want to ask the skills lead, but a couple of very brief things. There is green skills particularly are really important, because if we're going to have a just transition, then we need to ensure that people are properly skilled up for those roles. I'm going to give you an example that is actually from Peterborough, but its ramifications, I think, go across the region. So Peterborough College has a Centre for Green Technology that the Combined Authority has very significantly funded, and that will focus on a whole range of jobs, but that will include things like how to fit out an electric car, how to retrofit, all those skills that we need right across the region, and that there are training opportunities for that. So that will be one example, and I'm using that as an example because I relatively recently visited the build works there, and it's progressing very well. So there is very much a focus on that, and in general, what the skills team are trying to do is to look at need and assess that need and meet that need. So, Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood, you mentioned the work on cold spots. That work is still ongoing, but it is absolutely about finding the places where there are gaps in skills provision and there are gaps in skills and meeting that need, because if as a whole area we are drawing in new jobs, we want to ensure that those jobs are available for people who are here already as well as people who are coming in. And something that I am very keen on pushing, and if you have the joys of watching the Combined Authority meetings online, I'm sure you are avidly glued to every time they are being broadcast. You will know that one of the things I am frequently pointing out is that we mustn't see inequalities in the Combined Authority as a simple geographical split. Cambridge, as we know, is a very unequal city. We have areas of significant deprivation here. We have significant inequalities. And something that I am always pointing out is that as we address inequalities across the combined authority area, we must think about inequalities within our authorities, as well as kind of looking kind of in a more geographical way, and particularly we need to avoid easy, everybody there is living in poverty, everybody here is rich. That isn't how it breaks down, and I'm always pushing that. It's very important to do. So I will continue to do everything I can to ensure that where where there are skills needs here in Cambridge or in the greater Cambridge area, those are also being addressed.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Daly.
Two comments if I can, Chair. One is to express my ongoing gratitude to Councillor Smith for her work on the Combined Authority. I think it's often unrecognised, the unseen stuff that Councillor Smith is doing on our behalf, and it gives us a much greater leverage within the Combined Authority than I think people would necessarily understand. So it's really, number one, a thank you to Anna. Number two, oddly enough, it's on the back of Councillor Bick's point. The Cambridge Growth Company and the Advisory Council we're proposing should come to this committee for scrutiny in the same way that we scrutinise the Combined Authority, so that there's a route in for democratic accountability as to what that group is doing. And the first meeting of the Advisory Council is actually tomorrow, so you will expect to report at future S&R, which gives you the chance to, as a scrutiny committee, question what's going on. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Smith.
Councillor Smith, Simon Smith.
I'd like to add to Councillor Davies' remarks of thanks to Councillor Anna Smith. When the journey towards bus franchising started, there were a lot of people saying it wouldn't be possible and that the combined authority should pursue an extended partnership. And it was a moment of bold political leadership that led the CPCA and all the support and leadership from Councillor Smith that's led us to this point now where there's the consultation. But we just need to just remind ourselves of the importance of franchising, and I'm not a decision maker, so I'm not predetermining this, is that it will end the situation that we have now where private bus operators determine the routes that they take and they do that for profit. And there'll be a system where the democratically accounted councillors and the mayor will determine the routes and they'll invite the operators to bid for those, either set a call for a subsidy or a call for payment because of the profit they can make from that route. So for the first time for a long time, we are working and progressing towards a system of public transport determined by the needs of the public. And it's been a long time in coming, and I do hope there is a successful outcome from this consultation. So thank you.
Thank you. Now we're finishing that debate, I think.
Chair, could I just make
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
one addition? Was to say thank you. The lovely comments there. I think the real credit for this work has to go to our Mayor Nick Johnson. The political leadership that is needed at the very highest level to have a focus on reforming buses. You cannot underestimate that, and the amount of work that Mayor Nick has done to ensure that we're at this point to push forward for Tiger cards, to push forward for free transport for older and disabled people at peak times has been incredibly powerful. And so I'm very grateful for the thanks that comes locally, but I think as a committee, I'd want to emphasise our thanks to Mayor Nick for the work that he is doing across the region. And I also wanted to just pick up on, I think it's fantastic that we're looking at the other Cambridge Growth Company through this committee. And it has an additional benefit that I've only really just thought of as I've been doing this report, which is, of course, Mayor Dr. Nick is also on the Cambridge Growth Company representing the whole combined authority area. So you kind of get a double whammy on being able to scrutinise that, because you can scrutinise Councillor Davey, but you can also ask about what the combined authority specifically is doing on that too. So I think it's really important that that comes to this committee.
All right, thank you. Now, those recommendations is just to note this whole report. So we'll note it and move on to the next item, I think, which is item 6, annual complaints self-assessment. On page 67 of the papers, you'll find it. There's also an additional, an addendum being published separately this afternoon to add clarification to the whole report. That's on a separate bit of paper. So now we have Tony Stead, Customer Service Development Manager, to introduce this item. I hope he's still there.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Would you like to introduce it to us then, please?
Love to. Thank you. So thank you for having me. I'm here to present to you the annual complaint self-assessment report. This has come to us following a consultation from the Housing Ombudsman, who issued a statutory code which was brought in from the 1st of April this year. And part of that code was to monitor compliance with their statutory code. So the self-assessment process is part of that, and the purpose is to check that our complaints process runs against their code of practice. We need to run this annually and publish it on the council website with a response from members. This assessment looks at the process we use and doesn't cover reporting on actual complaints. That will still be done by the annual customer feedback report. But in future years, these two items will be presented together in the meeting in July. So the reason this is here today is because we require approval of this by the 29th of November to ensure that we remain compliant with the Housing Ombudsman Statutory Code of Practice. And it's out of cycle this year because of the date the code was introduced, and we'd already run with our annual report and we weren't aware of this new guidance coming in, the new requirement coming in to run the assessment. Alongside this, it was requested by the Housing Ombudsman, but we did take the opportunity to use it to review our complaints process in general, because we only have one complaints process, whether you're a resident or a tenant or a visitor. So we ran the assessment against the process to make sure that we were operating to the highest standard possible. And alongside that, our customer feedback report will continue to cover all services offered by the council when we bring it here, but we will be taking the housing sections and extracting those into a smaller version for a housing report to be presented at a Housing Scrutiny Committee alongside this from the Housing Ombudsman. The assessment did find that we were largely compliant with the code anyway. We did make some minor tweaks to our internal processes, but as you'll see from the report, we are very compliant with the code, and following this meeting and hopefully approval of publication, we will be fully compliant with the code.
Good, thank you. Oh, Councillor Liberal Democrat, which one of you? Go ahead.
Yeah, just a brief point. So this is the general complaints process that you were reviewing, or were we just reviewing our complaints process against housing? It was a very odd, it kept talking about landlords. Are we?
Yeah, appreciate that. So this is an assessment that's sent to everybody who signs up to the Housing Ombudsman service, and as such it does refer to landlords, but in that instance landlords does mean the council. I will be going through the assessment following this to update the language to change from landlord to council, so that it's more obvious and clear on the website once it's published.
So whenever it says landlord, it means council and applies to all services, not just housing.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, that's really grateful. I'm grateful because it did read very oddly. I think we all found that. I have one specific question, because in many respects, this is what it is, isn't it? We're, I think, just noting it. But there is a statement in here that landlords or councils must recognise the difference between a service request and a complaint, but they should still record a service request. I just wanted to say that I get that, but I think there is a difference that really needs to be broken out in that. Service requests for something that's suddenly broken and needs a repair is clearly different from a service request for something that should have happened on a routine basis. And I think that they need to be separated in the way we record them, because you expect, it's a service standard that your bin's collected every other week or whatever, but it isn't a service standard that someone in the council guesses if you need a repair to something in your flat. So there needs to be a distinction, because they are measuring somewhat different things, and I just wondered whether officers could look at breaking that out so that when we do see the actual substantive reports, we can see those things separately.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, thank you for your question. We'll certainly look to expand our definition of a service request. Our current one is we've taken on the recommended definition from the Ombudsman, which is written down there, but I don't know it off by heart, which I really should by now. But we essentially say that if it's something that's been brought to our attention for the first time and we're unaware of it, we would treat it as a service request. But if it's something that we've had the chance to put right already, we would then consider it a complaint. So if it is something that's been going on, as you suggest, we would consider that to be a complaint. But we do have a triage team who triage each complaint as it comes in, and they will see it. And if it does read as a service request, they will recategorize it as such and pass it to the service. But if they do believe it's a complaint, or the other way around, if a complaint comes in that is a service request, they'll they will use the definition to identify those and get them resolved accordingly.
Jane, you wanted to make a contribution?
If I may, Chair, I think the difference between a service request and a complaint is really, really clear. I think what Councillor Bick is asking for is the breakdown of the different kinds of service request we get. I think that is an entirely deliverable thing, and I will pick that up with Clarissa Norman, our customer support manager, who I suspect already has that data. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Further questions? No, oh, it's Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. Will there be training given to councillors as to what our role is in this? Because quite often service requests and complaints come through councillors.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to facilitate any training for any number of councillors or members that would wish to have that. It's part of my role within the council to train our officers, so I'm more than happy to extend that to councillors as well.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions? No? All right, let's take that to the vote then. If you look at page 67, you'll see recommendations. Yeah, to approve it. Okay, can I see all those in favour of the recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you. A leader, yes, Councillor Davey, what do you make of it?
I'd be delighted to accept the recommendation.
Thank you. All right, if we move on to item 7, Treasury Management. On page 111, and I invite Jodie Etherington, our Chief Finance Officer, to introduce this, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the annual mid-year Treasury Management Report, which will go forward to full council following this meeting. So this is setting out essentially the council's position on both Treasury Management investments and borrowing over the first 6 months of the financial year, covering April to September 2024. So in terms of investments, just brief highlights. As at the 30th of September 24, we had just over £105 million invested. That's a mix of general fund and HRA investments. And the full breakdown of those is on page 128 of your reports pack. The interest income is forecast again to be significantly above budget this year, as it was last year. So we're currently forecasting for the full year interest income of £6.6 million against a budget of £3.5 million, so £3.1 million overachievement of interest income. That's down to two factors mainly. First of all, interest rates have remained higher for longer than anticipated. And secondly, due to some capital slippage, the actual balances that we have to invest are higher than had been anticipated when setting the budget back in February. In terms of performance for the year to date, the average interest earned on investments is 4.16%, compared to 4.62% in the same period last year. So it has come down by about 0.5%, but in the context of recent changes to base rate, that's not really surprising. I would expect those rates to continue to come down slowly, but they are coming down slowly. In terms of borrowing, the Council's total borrowing over the 6-month period has increased from £214 million to £244 million. The 214 is the HRA self-financing debt that the Council has had since the self-financing arrangements were put into place. The additional 30 million is the first drawdown of borrowing that was arranged to fund the Park Street redevelopment, and the first drawdown of that took place in April. And the interest rate on that borrowing is just under 1.7%. So the fact we had the ability to fix that rate in advance means we've got a very good interest rate on that in the prevailing market. So the recommendations are to recommend to Council the prudential indicators are set out on pages 120 to 122 of your report pack, and to note that there have been no changes to the counterparty list as advised by our external Treasury advisors, and happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
questions from the floor. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two quick questions. On page 117, you talk about the external borrowing as at 30th September is 244 million. And just above that, the estimated external debt is going to rise by the end of the year to 313. And so my question was, do we think we'll actually get there? The capital slippage always happens in the council and projects don't happen as quickly as you might expect. So I was just wondering whether we're actually going to get there this year or not, your estimate. And then finally, very quickly, on page 128, you talk about gosh, where is it? Liquidity instruments. Just so I'm struggling to find it now. But if you would just give an indication of what they are. Thank you. Yes, it's on the graph. You're right.
Okay, thank you. So in answer to the first question, I think the additional borrowing that is foreseen for the rest of the financial year mainly relates to the HRA programme. I think it will be dependent on whether that capital expenditure actually goes ahead this year. I think there is likely to be some further slippage. Obviously, we won't borrow until we need to. We don't borrow in advance of need. So if the expenditure slips, then the borrowing will slip also. And in terms of liquidity instruments on page 128, what we're talking about there is effectively treasury management investments that we use to manage our short-term cash flow demands. So those will be anything that is basically a deposit on demand, a same-day deposit, or a 3-day notice deposit effectively. So this is around about half of our deposits at the moment are on that basis, so we can manage day-to-day cash flow.
Nothing dodgy, in other words. Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you for that report, Jodie. May I ask my usual two questions? Are we likely to make any further progress to decarbonising our Treasury reserves in the near future? And could you update us on the position with Barclays Bank, which was mentioned in the motion brought before Council in May 2024? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. So first of all, in terms of decarbonisation and ESG considerations more widely, we are to some extent limited by the statutory investment guidance that all local authorities are required to follow. That was last updated by the government in 2018. We're also required to follow the SIT for Treasury Management Code, and both of those pieces of statutory guidance require us to give priority to security and then liquidity of our investments before going on to consider yield, and then after that any particular ESG considerations. So there are some difficulties, some barriers. I think some of this, maybe some of the statutory guidance needs to be looked at again. It has been 6 years now. But also I think there's a recognition in the SIT for Code that actually this is quite difficult for local authorities generally. It is a lot easier in some of the longer term investments. So looking at sort of equity and bond investments, they tend to be a lot more developed in terms of their ESG reporting as opposed to short-term cash investments or investments with other local authorities, which is where we tend to place a lot of our money. So I think part of this is about as we work through the budget setting process over the spring, if we can develop a more sophisticated medium to long-term cash flow planning tool, then we may be able to actually invest some of our funds over a longer horizon, and that may provide access to some other opportunities with maybe some better ESG credentials. And in terms of, sorry, your second question was Barclays Bank. So yes, obviously we're aware of the motion. We are in contract with Barclays Bank until 2026. But we will obviously, as we go through, as we come towards the end of that process, we will enter a procurement process as we would with any major contract, and we will take that motion into account as part of that process. And clearly members will be you know, will be an integral part of developing that procurement process, and that can be considered at the time.
Thank you.
Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood.
Sorry, so this is item 7 on the capital financing requirement, and it's the table on that. So for 2027-28, on the general fund CFR, I've put in a different figure now. Is that right? The figure you have down there, which is...
What page?
Sorry, it's page 117 on the paper copy. So it's item 7.2, 7.3. It's the table under 7.2.
Figure you querying?
It's the figure for 2027-28 for the general fund capital finance, the CFR capital financing requirement. Is that right? Because it doesn't add up to the total CFR. Should the general fund capital financing, it's just the numbers, and it's the number in the first line for the general fund. I think there's a slip there, maybe a typing slip, or I've misunderstood something.
Yeah, I'll have to come back to you on that one.
Very minor point, because I think it's 106,185 million. No, not million. Oh dear, now I'm doing it. But it's 106,185. It should be, I think.
Sorry, yeah, I can follow where you are now. It looks like a typo in that table,
I think
but
it's a typo.
the correct figures are further down on page in the appendix.
Yes, they are. She
Yeah.
says. I'd have to
So, sorry, that is page 120 has the correct figures. You're absolutely right. Yes, the general fund is 106,185. The figure in the table above must have been left in probably from an older version of the report, so apologies for that.
Impressed. I'm impressed.
I suspect the figure might change before we get to 2027. Any further questions or points?
Apologies, I haven't switched off my microphone.
Right. Okay, no further questions? Can I take you to the recommendations on page 111? Which are to adopt all this, I should think. Yeah, 112. 2.1 and 2.2 to accept all the figures, basically. And note the changes. Can I see all those in favour?
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
And Councillor Smith,
Very pleased to accept recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that completes the business for today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, officers, for all your time as well, particularly Jodie and Tony.